Zoom by clicking on Go Live.
Okay.
So tell me when you get a screen that says you're ready to go, you're just about ready, or click the button. It does take us a couple seconds to connect.
It's live. It's already live.
Okay, it says it's live.
Is that right, Justin?
Sorry, I just got off the phone. I should be looking at the YouTube. Is that what I'm looking at?
Can you look at the YouTube link?
Yeah.
From what the public would be viewing, Justin, and tell us if we're live. Boy, am I glad my camera's not on that we're live.
Okay, there's YouTube.
Oh, Tim. Hi, Tim. You're our new person. I haven't met you before. Nice to meet you.
Hi, Tim.
You can't see me because I left my camera at my desk. Would be viewing, Justin, and tell us if we're live. Boy, am I glad my camera's not on that we're live.
It's live because it tells me to end stream.
Yeah, you're live. I just double checked. Got a little time delayed replay there. We are live. How's that?
Everybody needs to know from this very moment that we are live streaming to the universe. So we will keep our conversation appropriate to what the public will hear. I'm going to give that general warning right now. I'm also going to warn you that everything you say is subject to a public records request. And this is for your purposes, Christy. When you start a meeting, you're going to want your host, or you're going to want to mention that to people. We're being recorded. Everything that you say or put in a chat, if in fact it's enabled, is subject to public records request. So people are reminded to be appropriate. So since we're live and it's almost time to start, go ahead and hit the record button in Zoom, because we want to have that recording as well.
That's what I'm talking about. I don't have that in Zoom, and I'm on a really big delay. Is everyone else?
No,
Are you looking at YouTube, or are you looking at live stream or Zoom?
Right. If you've got YouTube open, that'll definitely be delayed.
Yes. So
Okay.
you can minimize your YouTube screen so that you don't hear that or see that. And then go back to your Zoom meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to want to hit the record button, and it's going to be on your toolbar right next to share screen.
This is YouTube over here. Okay, I'm not certain what I'm doing because
it's okay. I'm going to hit the record button because I have access to it.
And
I'll just go ahead and start the recording. It's okay.
Where are you?
I am at my toolbar at the bottom. And so it's from the left to the right. It says mute, start video, participants, chat, share screen, record live transcripts, reactions, apps, and whiteboards. Do you have that toolbar?
No.
Okay, well, I do. So I'm going to hit the record button. Okay, so you're going to have to give me permission. It says, please ask the host to give you permission.
I don't know where I am in this.
Are you able to make me host up in the participants? Can you make me host and I'll help you? Channeling.
I have two YouTube videos going. One, that's what I'm saying. I don't know where I went.
Where's your Zoom? So how about this? Take your, if you want to flip through your screens really quickly, hold your Alt button down and hit the Tab button, and you'll be able to scroll through your screens that you have open and you find your Zoom.
I have two Zoom that doesn't show me anything. I'm gonna cry.
Don't cry. Don't cry. I'm here. And I'm channeling my inner Justin because he's always calm. We're going to get this done. Let's see.
I have just a Zoom page that just says Zoom on it, and that's it.
Can you share your screen with me?
From here, I'd have to go to Teams because I don't have anything to share with you here.
Oh, well, you can't share from Teams.
Maybe there's a box. Can you just double click on your Zoom box and make it bigger somehow?
Or do you see a little view thing up in the right corner? It says view, and you can go from speaker to gallery to full screen. That might help you if you go to full screen view.
Okay, I just got something that says, stand by, this meeting is being live streamed.
Yeah, that's your Zoom. That's your YouTube. I'm sorry.
Hi. Okay. Do you want me to share my screen?
If you see your toolbar, why don't you go to the...
I have it now, yeah. There's
Okay.
7 of us on.
Let's go to participants, click on participants and make me the host. So I can make sure we've got everything dialed in and then we're good to go. And it's only 8:56, so we're 3 minutes or 4 minutes ahead of schedule. We're doing great.
I made you the host.
I'm the host. All right.
Yes.
Okay. Now I am going to see what I can do here. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do, and just let everybody in the meeting know that I'm going to start the recording, and we are live. We are currently live streaming. So I'm going to start the meeting. Okay. And so our YouTube is going, our recording is going. Justin, are you okay if I hang out and hang on to the host controls to help Christy?
Sounds great.
Okay. All right. I think we're good to go. Thanks everybody that's here, for your patience with us getting through this. We really appreciate it.
All right, we've got just a couple more minutes till our official start time. I'm gonna ask real quick. I ask this every time and I should have this memorized by now, but Chad, is that you at 8263 on the phone? Or maybe I should ask instead, who's on the phone at last 4 digits? Oh, there we go.
That's me, Justin. Chad.
Okay, welcome, Chad. Thank you. And I guess, oh, there we go. Thank you for the rename.
Chad, what's your last name?
It's Courtney, Courtney.
Courtney, yes.
Oh, thank you. I'll add it to your name here so we can have it for the record. And then Mr. Kastner is Trent, is that correct?
That's correct.
Perfect.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. So almost 9. I'll say that Mark Owens said he was going to be late, probably by about a half an hour, and I'm sorry, Ken Maston emailed in that said he had cows coming in, and he wasn't going to be able to make it. So we'll miss those two folks. At least it sounds like Ken for the meeting and Mark for the first bit. And I think that looks like Floyd's the only other person that we aren't seeing yet, but I think we're probably good to get started. So in the absence of Ken, I'd ask Marshall to step in as the vice chair to lead the meeting.
Well, thank you, Justin, and welcome everybody. How many do we need to have to consider it a quorum?
I think just 5. So
Okay,
I'm good.
then we're good.
Yep.
So I will call the meeting to order at this point, and the next item then would be introductions, and probably is always worth the time to go through it kind of briefly. I'm Marshall Gannett. I am a member of the Groundwater Advisory Committee, and my background is hydrogeology. So I'll just go through the list as people are on my screen. So Christy, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Christy. I'm an AS2 here for Groundwater, and this is my second GWAC meeting.
Great.
So please bear with me as I'm still learning and have to have tremendous support.
Me too. How about you, Nirvana?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nirvana. I am assistant to the director, formerly Director Byler, and now Acting Director Woodcock. And I'm also assistant to the commission. I am here to give Christy whatever support she needs, because I was very recently in her shoes, and I know this is sometimes complicated. So I am happy to help in any way that I can. And it's nice to see everybody.
Justin.
Hi, I'm Justin Iverson. I manage the groundwater section of the department.
And Susan, you're the next on my screen.
Susan Baker, Jackson County. I oversee the public wells in Jackson County.
Okay. And Richard?
Good morning. I'm just an old farmer with several domestic wells and have been involved in water issues for nigh on to 30 years. Live in the Hillsborough area.
Gotcha. Phil?
Hi, I'm Phil Brown. I'm a hydrogeologist. I'm gonna have to step away for a second. Sorry.
Okay, good enough. Laura?
What the hell is happening?
Yeah, I'm Laura. I'm with the department. I'm helping Justin and Chris on the groundwater allocation and the well construction rulemaking efforts.
Great. Tim?
I'm the new assistant section manager for groundwater, supporting Justin and the team there at Water Resources.
Okay. Trent, you're up next.
I'm Trent Cass. I'm monitoring well driller, and I've been in the business for quite a while. So representing the monitoring well folks.
Great. Okay. The next person is Eric Schneider. If you care to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, my name's Eric Schneider, Schneider Water Services, drilling contractor, mostly municipal and large irrigation.
Great. Are you per chance related to Steve?
Yep, he's my father.
Oh, good. Well, tell him I say hi.
I will do that.
Known him for a couple of decades, I think. Right. Thanks. Chad, you're up next.
Yeah, Chad Courtney here, water well driller, Pendleton, Oregon.
Okay. Next person is Andrew Wentworth.
Hi, I'm Andrew Wentworth. I'm a new hydrogeologist in the groundwater section.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thanks.
Carrie Cope.
Hi, I'm Carrie Cope. I'm the well fund coordinator with the department.
Great. Good to see you. Chris Bird, I think we all know you, Chris, but you could introduce yourself for new folks.
Sure. Good morning, Chris Bird. I'm the manager of the well construction here, well construction section here at the department. Good to see everybody.
Great. And Kim.
Good morning. I'm Kim Fritz Ogren. I manage the planning, collaboration, and investment section at the Water Resources Department.
Great, thank you. And there's somebody named Bobby.
Hi, my name's Bobby. I work with dam safety at our RWRD, and I'm just sitting in to see what it's all about.
Great, thank you. Okay, I
Mr.
think-
Gannon, can we get Bobby's last name for the record, please?
Bobby Vogt.
Oh, hi, Bobby. Okay, perfect.
Okay, and I saw I saw Floyd pop in and out, so he's joining us. I'm assuming he just having a technical glitch and will be back. And I'm thankful that all this little screens didn't scramble on my screen like they do every once in a while. Then we would have had to start over. Okay, so I think we've gotten the introductions done, and moving on to agenda item C, which is the approval of the minutes. And so has everybody had a chance to take a look at them, and are there any corrections, additions to the minutes from the last meeting? Welcome, Mark.
Thanks, Marshall.
Do you want to do a real quick introduction, because we just got done with that part, and we're moving on to the minutes?
Perfect. Thanks. Yeah, good morning, all. Mark Goins, alfalfa farmer from Southeast Oregon. And as I joined on, this might also be my last meeting at the GWAC. Been on it here for 2 terms now. I appreciate it. So
We'll miss you, man. Okay, so back to the minutes. Any comments or additions, corrections? If not, I would entertain a notion to approve them.
I've reviewed and I have no comments, so I'd make a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Show your hands or whatever, and we'll consider anybody against approving the minutes. Okay, then we'll minutes are approved. So agenda item D, Chris Bird is up next to present updates on the committee implementation of House Bill 2145. Chris, I turn it over to you.
Great, yeah, thanks. I just wanted to give the committee a brief update. We're beginning our rulemaking efforts with regard to House Bill 2145, which the first piece actually kicked in January 2022, and we had another phase that kicked in July of this year. And then we have additional phases that kick in next July. And then the January after that, we have a report to the legislature. We're finally beginning rulemaking. We're going to start that on December 13th. And with that rulemaking, we're also incorporating a rulemaking that we started back in 2019, 2020, right before COVID hit. And that's regarding House Bill 3030 and Senate Bill 688, which is regarding temporary licenses for the spouses of military members. So that will also be included in our rulemaking effort. And so we're gonna just take this opportunity to use the rack that we've already assembled for that. We're still trying to get a few more members, so I don't have a final list of members yet. But we anticipate, having these rules adopted by next July 1st, which is the date our next phase of items kick in from House Bill 2145. So I'm happy to answer any questions. I just wanted to give you all an update on that. Perfect. Thanks. I'll stick around if you guys need anything.
Thanks, Chris.
So if there are no questions for Chris, I think we'll go ahead to agenda item E, which is
one second. I'm sorry,
I'm sorry.
Marshall. I should have given a quick preface. So House Bill 2145 did a number of things. Another one of them was to establish I'm going to butcher this, the well alteration, repair, and I'll just introduce Kim. Sorry. Kim's also going to give an update on another piece of the House Bill 2145 update. So, and she,
great. Okay.
She can describe the acronym correctly. So.
Oh, My apologies, I didn't see that. And Kim.
All good. Well, good morning again. Yes, I'm going to provide a brief update on the Water Well Abandonment Repair and Replacement Fund. And with me is Carrie Cope to answer any questions folks have. She's been implementing the program. I believe I've had colleagues come in the past and provide an update to this group just as we prepared to launch the new funding opportunity. And so we wanted to provide a little bit of update now that it's been up and running for a little bit. Some background. So this funding opportunity was included in House Bill 2145. It has a pretty broad authority of what money can be used for deepening, repair, replacement, abandonment of various wells to address groundwater issues across the state. But in December of 2021, the legislature asked us to focus the launch of the fund on addressing dry wells impacted by drought and wildfire for those of low to moderate income. So we worked to launch the funding opportunity on June 1st of this year. And since then, we've received, as of I think last week on November 7th, we've received over 145 applications, completed 99 interim reviews of those applications for eligibility and completeness, authorized 66 pre-inspections. So we have a well inspector go out and verify what work needs to be done. They've completed 52 of those pre-inspections, and we've entered into over 36 grant agreements with folks looking to address their well issues. So we've made a lot of progress, but we're trying to make even more progress and reduce a little bit of a backlog that has formed. So we're forming a team to work to address that, so we can then begin to move towards launching another funding opportunity, House Bill 3092, the Harney Domestic Well Remediation Fund, and then work on phase 2 of the funding opportunity of the Water Well Abandonment Repair and Replacement Fund opportunity as well. That's my brief update. If we have any questions, happy to answer them.
Any questions for Kim?
I do, Marshall. Hey, Kim, just curious, does it look like all the funds will be expended through the well drilling or the well rehabilitation? How's that going? How much do you have in the queue? Are we looking at more funding? Just something along those lines.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. It looks like Carrie's going to check to see what the running total is at this point in time. I know that we have put in our agency request budget to get more funds, so I believe we anticipate going through all of those, but I don't know if we have reached the request for the 5.4 million at this point in time. Carrie, do you know?
Yeah, so far we've had about 2.5 million requested. But again, I'm not through all the applications and they're still coming in. So about half of it's been requested at this point. A good chunk of it going, of course, to Deschutes, Klamath, and Jackson County. So right now we still have funding, plenty of funding remaining, and I'm telling people when they call and ask to just submit an application. But again, we're still getting applications on a daily basis almost, so it's not slowing down much.
So I have a quick question. How did you determine who was going to be allotted the funds? Because it was for lower income, is that correct? Because we received money from the state here in Jackson County, and we chose not to go that route because of the time constraint that it would have created, you know, and there would, so I'm just curious, was there an income that you went off of, or?
Yeah, Thanks, Susan. So in the December 2021 legislative session, my understanding is that a number of counties received funding and they weren't given any restrictions on how those dollars would be used. But the department was directed on the statewide program to first prioritize those of low to moderate income. And how we chose to define that was to look at how it's defined federally and some other funding opportunities in order to make it easier for applicants. So if you qualify for SNAP or for a number of other assistance programs for those to low to moderate income, you can then qualify for ours, and it just makes it easier for folks on that end.
All right, thank you. Well, I know the money that we got from the state, it was gone within 3 or 4 months, and now it's just waiting for well drillers, which is a year out. So thank you for that information. I appreciate it.
Okay, are there any other questions related to agenda item D for Chris or Kim or Carrie? Thank you. That was a great update. So we'll move on to agenda item E, which is a big one, I think. And Justin, I'm looking forward to hearing. You know, I read the summary. Thank you for that. I'll just make a comment for what it's worth. Looking at the comments and suggestions and all the feedback you guys got, my impression was you did a pretty good job of introducing the whole idea to folks at the meetings. So I'll just say that. Anyway, so go ahead. The floor is yours, my friend.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that feedback, and certainly appreciate the input that y'all provided last time we met on how to make that better. I'm curious just to see how many people on the committee actually watched one of those public meetings. 1, 2. Okay. Fear not, I've got a summary in my slide deck. So for those that have already seen them, hopefully this will something different will stick the second time around. But I did want to, well, both for you. Oh, host disabled. Okay, I need to ask the host if I can share my screen, please. That would be great. I wanted to make sure that I had the opportunity to go back over what I actually presented, because it did change a bit based on your guys' feedback and other feedback I got as we were preparing this, and frankly on the fly as we were going. One second here, I'm gonna try and get a hold of Nirvana a second way here so she can allow me to share.
Justin, I think I corrected that. Are you able to share now?
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Wait one second. Let me click the button here. Yep, there it goes. Perfect. Okay. Then of course we'll do this standard thing by which I show folks the presentation, and then of course I need to, I think I need to do this. So can folks see just the slide and not my notes?
There we're seeing just the slide and not
just the slide. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so this is a presentation that I'm planning to run through with the commission on Friday. It is draft at this point, and any input that you folks have, I would love to incorporate. So getting a sneak peek, and then this is I put an hour on the agenda for this. I think we've in fact got an hour and 10 minutes for the commission. So I'm probably not going to go through this in as much detail as I will for the commission, because I think you folks are a bit more familiar with it. And I would like to take some time at the end to continue our conversation about where we go next and kind of how we approach the rule writing. So again, we've got just some background that back in December, the commission directed us to develop a allocation policy more sustainable and protective of senior users. And allocation, of course, is the process, not of course, I should say allocation is the process by which we take applications for a groundwater right in this case and assess those against various statutory provisions about whether or not this is in the public interest. And one of those criteria is water available. So that's really what we're focusing on here, is that statutory requirement that water be available for new appropriation or for issuing new water rights. Most recently in September and October, we convened 5 facilitated public outreach meetings to seek input from the public ahead of drafting up some rules. We held those 5 meetings across the state. They were all hybrid for ease of participation. So regardless of where we were physically, folks were hopefully able to find something relatively near them to attend in person if they chose. But we were always online, and our 5th meeting was just online, so it doesn't have a star on the map here. We tried to ease participation every way we could. We took input both verbally at the meeting or written. We had written forms, or even we had some computers set up at the meetings where people could sit down and type out their comments. We had a kind of formal survey that that had some questions on it to spark people's thoughts. So yeah, I'll share the compliment that that Marshall just gave at the top of this item by saying also that Laura Hart, who's here with us today and is our rules coordinator, also had a big hand in helping plan these meetings out and planning a written survey along with our consultants at Kearns and West to get good input along the lines of what we were looking for. And people could also fill out those surveys online, and they could do that from home if they were kind of attending these meetings virtually. And then lastly, we got a good handful of kind of emails and phone calls that weren't part of the kind of official way to provide input, or the structured way, I should say, but we incorporated those as well. And those are in the full report, which is online, and I'll show you how to get there in a couple slides. Just in summary, we had more than 400 participants, both online and in person at our meetings. We had more than 100 survey responses and more than 50 written comments on the allocation process. So that full report is close to 100 pages and documents all those individual pieces of input we got. So that's out there and available. This was the agenda for our outreach meetings. Again, we gave what we tried to keep a relatively short background piece, about 35 minutes, and we tried to retain the majority of the meeting for feedback and conversation and answering any questions folks had. And so for today's presentation, what I'm going to do is I want to run through kind of these kind of key concepts that we brought up at the beginning of the meeting for those that weren't able to watch at the time that they went on last couple months, and then give a summary of our survey responses, which were also in that written document that I forwarded to committee members yesterday. And again, I want to kind of point people, if you're interested in seeing individual comments, the full report, which is 92 megabytes, is up on our website, and you can get there here from the homepage. If you go to news and updates here. It might show up on the right-hand side of a computer screen, or you might have to scroll down on a phone. And there's here our groundwater allocation project. And if you click on that, you'll get to a dedicated web page that'll show you all the information we have. There's recordings of the meetings there, and we will continue to update that page as the rulemaking progresses. Okay, so sorry, getting ahead of myself. So again, I'm going to run through these key groundwater concepts relatively quickly, especially with this group, and as well as these allocation issues, which I've presented before in past meetings. We'll spend most of our, well, the new information will be the summary of input and survey responses, one slide on next steps, and then hope to have a good conversation with folks about your input. So these key groundwater concepts. So this is ultimately what I ended up presenting to folks, and you'll recognize a couple of these slides. A number of them are new. I tried to get at the groundwater surface water connection piece in multiple ways. So started out with the picture of a spring and groundwater adding goodly contribution to the Metolius River here, estimated at about 200 CFS at some point. I talked about groundwater being water that's in pore space and fracture space in the rock that we don't have underground rivers or lakes in Oregon, aside from maybe a submerged lava tube or two or several. I emphasized that groundwater was just a part of the hydrologic cycle, that groundwater receives recharge, that it flows to someplace, and that in Oregon, in many cases, that flow is to discharge to surface water bodies, to creeks and springs, seeps, directly underneath rivers. And then I tried to simplify that with this block diagram that should be pretty familiar at this point. I talked about, well, I tried to go through this thought process of, hey, here's a creek that I like to go to in August, September when it's hot in the valley, and it's reliably flowing, even though it's been dry for a couple months. There's no dams above this creek, there's no snowpack, and that this is base flow. This is groundwater discharge through the summer, that this discharge is relied upon by the first users of water, the earliest users, the most senior users. And in our prior appropriation system, that, you know, even though that's all groundwater, that is accounted for as in it's been promised, if you will, through water rights to senior users. And that when we pump groundwater, we are intercepting water along a flow path. Well, we're both at early time pumping storage, first of all, so we're removing some amount of groundwater from storage, but then at late time, we are intercepting flow that would otherwise flow to surface water. Again, that surface water that's already fully appropriated. Took another time step forward and tried to show the water that was drained from pore space at early time, and that once that cone of depression reaches a stream, that we can actually pull water from hydraulically connected streams. I did choose to keep this plot in, even though this was kind of the most technical of the presentation, and took Marshall's advice and spent some time kind of describing the axes and hitting on the key point that, again, this is showing from a pumping well, the percentage of the water flowing from that well that is coming from this curve, water from storage, this other curve, water from stream flow depletion, with pumping time on the x-axis, and that at early time, we pump water from storage, we drop down the water table or the potentiometric surface, and over time, with a hydraulically connected stream, as that cone of depression spreads out, we draw less and less from storage and more from capture stream flow depletion, so that at long times, water from storage approaches 0% of the groundwater being pumped from wells, and water from stream flow depletion approaches 100%. And again, this pumping time is there's no gradient or gradations on here. It's highly dependent on the location of the well with respect to surface water or other sources of capture. And so that's difficult to pin down the exactness here, but I put in a slide, a real world slide a little later that that shows this stream flow depletion curve again in a modeled space. Again, tried to get at this groundwater surface water connection with a quote for those that that learn better in that case. And then we have this plot and the punchline that hopefully after that primer, folks can nod along to the understanding that over the past 65 years of groundwater appropriation, groundwater again is can be thought of, I guess, as a three-dimensional distribution system whereby clean potable water is generally available under our feet pretty much anywhere we are in the state, but that by drawing that water out for beneficial uses, we are having impacts, right? It's not, there's no free lunch. So after that, I switched to talking about, again, allocation or issuing of water right issues with that and potential solutions. And again, some issues arising from the existing allocation process. I think that I got feedback from folks here to show a hydrograph. And so I put in this great composite hydrograph. Great is probably not the right word. Good example from the Harney Basin of declining groundwater levels and talked about that with folks. I also kept this map, even though it's hard to read, I realize, but just to show that, in one of the issues we have is when we have an application that is far from data sources here, observation wells in green, and an application here at this red plus mark that we have to kind of use our best professional judgment and use our best available information to make decisions in that case, right? And in the past, we might have said, hey, data doesn't exist in the immediate vicinity. We would issue a water right and condition that water right to collect information. So we would have that for next time. And that one issue we've seen with that unintentionally is that there's a lag time between when a project's built out and we get data coming back and other applications that come in. So for example, again, in the Harney Basin, where we got in trouble was that we were issuing permits before information had come back from the permits we'd previously issued, and we got into an over allocation situation there. So again, pointing out that more than 70% of groundwater applications over the last decade have resulted in a permit, and approximately 80% of those have been in areas of concern for one reason or another. The concerns report was presented in June, I think, of 2021. So there's a link to that for more information, but I didn't belabor the point too much. And then in earlier iterations of this, I called these concepts, but as I went on, I started to title these slides with kind of the source of water to wells. So I was focusing on storage and I was focusing on capture. And so I gave some examples of storage issues, especially in cases where the groundwater systems that a well was tapping weren't very well hydraulically connected to surface water. Showed this Mount Angel example. I showed this at our last meeting, so I won't talk about the various hydrographs I showed since I've gone over this before. But the punchline is that we don't have, the statute says we shall maintain reasonably stable water levels, and that should be a component of is water available. However, we haven't defined what reasonably stable is, only what excessively declined is. And so that leads to some ambiguity whereby, how it's not necessarily clear, which one of these various water level trends from across the Deschutes Basin in this case is reasonably stable or not. I mean, in some cases, I think it's relatively easy to say reasonably stable. In other cases, is half a foot of decline a year, is that reasonably stable? Is a foot a year reasonably stable? None of these have tripped the excessively declined criteria that are currently in rule. So that's one of our challenges for the rule writing effort, I believe, is to at least have some criteria by which we can consistently assess reasonably stable water levels so that we can meet our statutory policy goal of first determining, that's what we're doing now, and then maintaining reasonably stable water levels through our water right issuance process or the allocation process. And then with that, I stepped over to the capture side of the source of water to wells, talked about how our definition of overappropriation as defined is a two-part, and I skipped over the first part here in my quote here and focused on the second part of overappropriation exists when groundwater allocation results in further depletion of already overappropriated surface waters. And I talked about how we had constrained our look to only those groundwater applications whereby the use was determined through Division 9 rule criteria to have the potential for substantial interference, and how that basically, in my words, protected against short-term and acute effects of pumping on stream flow, but did not take long-term or cumulative effects into account very effectively. And I used this modeled stream depletion curve from, again, the Deschutes Basin, where we have a numerical model, and we had the opportunity to run this model and pull some output out. This wasn't actually for a groundwater allocation question, but it illustrates the point that in general, we've constrained ourselves to looking at impacts after 1 year. So in this case, again, here, this is just the stream depletion as a proportion of the pumping rate over time. And here we've got actual quantified time period in months, which is hard to kind of look at as we have it here, but this is basically 30 years. And so the well turns on at month 50-ish. And after 1 year, about 3%, and I should say this is a well that is many miles from the nearest point of hydraulic connection. So this would not have the potential for substantial interference. And if this was a new application, we'd say under today's rules, no potential for substantial interference. So we wouldn't take its impacts on surface water into account. And even if we did, we would constrain it likely to a year. And so we'd say 3% of the pumping rate comes out of the stream. But you can see that as the model runs on and the well keeps pumping over time, that just like in the idealized curves we saw at the beginning of the presentation, the source of water to that well from stream flow capture builds and builds. And after 30 years, it's 85+%, right? And it's that longer term impact that we're starting to see in the stream base flow record. And the more wells that are in this situation, they're additive, right? So that, this is almost, we'll just call it 85% of this particular well's pumping rate. But over time, some percentage that's going to grow to 100 over some amount of time of all the wells pumping are in many cases affecting surface water base flow. So And of course, then this plot that gets shown many, many times, according to our water availability reporting system, all that surface water shown in tan here in these water availability basins is already fully appropriated. So if and as we issue more groundwater rights, we will continue to impact this August available stream flow that is already fully appropriated. And then talked also about using regulation history. So with that, we opened up these public meetings to input. And I want to take a break right there because I, again, rushed through those slides in about half the time that I took in the public meetings to take into account some folks have already seen it and most folks are familiar, but I want to see if there's any questions on what I presented before we get into summary of the responses we got. All right, flicking through people's faces here. I see some shaking heads, so that's great. I will continue on. All right, so like I said, we sought feedback from folks during these meetings in multiple ways. And again, we got, I think, more than 100 survey responses, more than 50 additional comments. And I will try to, well, I'm going to summarize those here, similar to how our consultants summarized that input in that final report that, again, I had sent an abridged version to folks. That's also available on the commission website. And the full version is available on our website, as I showed folks how to get there from the current news, groundwater allocation project, and then hopefully everything will be there and available. One kind of overarching category that the consultants put together was the hopes of folks, like things that they hope will happen, both in the process and with the final rule. And these are kind of key themes that we heard, more than once. So, or probably I should say several times. So a transparent rulemaking process, right? That's everybody wants to know how we make these decisions, how these rules happen. So we're doing our best on that. And again, happy to have Laura Hart on board as our rules coordinator and a bunch of other folks in our newly expanded policy section to help us keep this all as transparent as possible. Folks hope for a diverse representation of interests and geographies across the state on the Rules Advisory Committee. And folks were asking for more kind of one-page summaries of issues and process steps. So again, our expanded policy section, we've now got two, I don't think the public information officer is actually their name, but folks that can help us put together these communication pieces, and we'll try and keep doing that. And then there was a laundry list of considerations, and this isn't all of them for sure, but we heard, hey, consider public impacts to the public resource, consider statewide interests. We also heard consider local conditions and consider impacts to individual water users. We had folks hope that we consider vulnerable communities, rural communities, and also fish, wildlife. GDE is a groundwater dependent ecosystem acronym, and in-stream rights, right? So that was also brought up at the last GWAC meeting as well. Under the overarching field of concerns, people are concerned that statewide rules might not capture local variations that affect the impacts of groundwater development in various parts of the state, right? And that is very well taken. Certainly, we've got a diverse hydrogeologic landscape. There are areas where, I spent a good long time talking about groundwater surface water interaction, And there are areas of the state where that interaction just isn't that strong. And so where we see that, the pumping from storage component of the source of water to wells is dominant, and that's where we see our large water level declines. So some areas of the internally drained Harney Basin, for example, some areas of the Columbia Plateau where the Columbia River basalts, especially deeper layers, aren't real well connected to streams or or to recharge areas. There we need to make sure that the rules also address pumping from storage. And so my hope, from my perspective, and I, be thinking about this, please focus on the committee because I'd love your input on this. But from my perspective, I feel like we should have a statewide baseline with an acknowledgement that perhaps local basin program rules can provide further clarity on some impacts of this new allocation process. So maybe we define some baseline value for reasonably stable and say and acknowledge, in the statewide rule that, hey, the basin program rule may provide a superseding value in a particular part of the state. So that's an idea, and I'd love to have more. People were concerned about exempt use versus permitted use into the future. Exempt uses are listed in statute, and so at least from the perspective of this rulemaking, we're not going to impact exempt uses, but I think that can be altered by other actions, right? By legislative action. I'm not exactly sure how the judiciary system interacts with particular statute. I guess I won't opine on that. But anyway, from our perspective in the rulemaking, that's not going to be an issue, but long-term, that's something to think about. I put an asterisk by this week. I should really put an asterisk by both of these. We did get a lot of questions about applications currently pending, right? So we have a backlog of applications in the queue, and those will be processed under the existing rule set. They won't be affected by this rulemaking. And we've had another channel of conversation with the commission about how we address the statutory requirement of water is available in cases where we don't have great information. So that's kind of a separate but concurrent conversation, and we got a good number of people bringing that up at these public meetings because we're out in the public for me at least is the first time in a couple of years. So lots of things that folks want to talk about other than these rules as well. We had some folks voice concerns, or maybe this was their ideas, opinions that there was need for legislative action, not just rulemaking. People specifically brought up just the prior appropriation doctrine in general. Again, we had a good conversation about that at the last Groundwater Advisory Committee meeting, and how we want to support efficient use of water as much as possible, but that the prior appropriation system doesn't necessarily reward that on the face of it. We had, especially at our Bend meeting, comments about the Deschutes mitigation program, which right now sets up a in-rule process by which groundwater pumping impacts on surface water in the basin can be mitigated. We heard from folks, hey, this is working, please don't change it. We heard from other folks, hey, this isn't working, please change it. So we are cognizant that new rules should integrate well with the current Deschutes mitigation program. Excuse me. And we'll certainly understand that the Deschutes mitigation program also has a separate track by which it gets reviewed annually, and any changes to be made to it have some process. So we will take that into account and integrate that as much as possible. And then we also heard about the potential impact on drought permits and short-term permits. Again, that was also something that GWAC brought up at previous meetings. So getting some alignment between you folks' input and those that we heard at the public meetings, which is great. So under the heading of data and information, certainly got a lot of inputs about the areas in the state where we have a lack of data. I could probably find a better word for that, but where we don't have as much data as we desire, especially water level data, and the default decisions where information on the potential impact of a new use cannot be determined is one of our checkboxes on the current review form. And certainly we've heard from the commission as well as from the public that it would be great to have some criteria by which we can say yes or no. And our goal, my goal, is that these new rules will address that, right? So the statute says we have to, we make our decisions with a preponderance of the evidence. That's we're more certain than not that some outcome, in this case of groundwater development, will be realized. And so we want to take that standard into account and write the rules such that we can take the information we have and the knowledge that we have and our best professional judgment and reach some decision on which we're, in light of all of the information we have, and some can argue for and some can argue against, but we're more confident than not that one thing or the other is going to happen, and that will lead to a clear decision point. We talked about or heard about the ability for folks to gather more groundwater level data through observation wells that the state installs. We heard folks ask us to consider climate change projections and to create again, more data and information communication tools, whether that be through maps or one-pagers or perhaps even real-time data from some of our observation recorder wells. And then, oh shoot, need a picture here. Get that on by Friday. Last we got some kind of bonus input, not necessarily on the rulemaking, but just in general, what, we wish, the public wishes that the department would support or develop water conservation and efficiency programs. Again, that should come as no surprise. We had a good conversation about that at our last meeting on the August 30th. Support and develop artificial groundwater recharge projects. Also have heard that from committee members over time, and to develop more defined mitigation programs for the potential for additional allocation in the future. So we did have a couple questions on the survey that just had checkboxes for, hey, tell us what you think is important. Folks could check more than one. So this first question was, hey, we've presented some ideas for criteria for what the new rules should evaluate in order to assess whether water is available. Trends in groundwater levels and surface water availability got significant support from 110 survey respondents, and this shows number of times the box was clicked. So this kind of looks like almost 100, well, near 100% click this trend in groundwater levels. Not as much for surface water regulation history. I'm not sure if that is because I only spent one slide on it in the presentation or what. We'll need to dig more into that. And I guess on all these, we have a a very long report of a lot of input that we've summarized, but certainly we're still digesting everything and working on it. And then we have this other category, and this was everybody's, not everybody, but maybe 20, 30 people's input on, hey, you should also consider this, that, or the other. So we'll go through those two in the long run. Question about the time frame for evaluating impacts of additional groundwater allocation on surface water. Again, folks could check more than one box. So 111 folks responded to the survey, and once you add these up, you're going to get much more than 111. But seems like a relatively clear trend here that folks thought, the majority of folks clicked this longer term look of 20 to 50 plus years out, that we should be considering long-term impacts of allocating groundwater today. And then a couple other survey responses, again, should we consider climate change? The majority said yes, some no. So kind of mixed bag, but leaning toward please consider that. If folks have any thoughts on that, I'm all ears. I don't have any bright ideas on that at the moment. Also, how to deal with insufficient information, right? Many, or I should say most, seem to be pointing toward the precautionary principle and to not issue a new water right in areas of insufficient information, or to request more information from the applicant. Others said shouldn't be a problem if you don't, our current stance is that in an area where we don't have a lot of data, it's, we assume that we don't have any over appropriation issues. And of course, we've found that to not be true in some cases where the data lags the development. But some folks in the survey thought that was okay. Okay, so next steps, just one slide. Again, it seems like we're continuously updating the rulemaking timeline here. And I'm gonna I'll talk about rulemaking just in general and all the rulemaking we have going on. We noted this in the staff report to the commission, but I'll also just note verbally to you, there's a lot of rulemaking coming up in the next year or two that involves groundwater components and involves time from our two rules coordinators. And we could, we just have seems like a backlog of rulemaking that we need to get through or that we've been asked to do. And so there's a lot competing for folks' time. So right now, our next step is, I'd mentioned at previous meetings that we've got kind of a cross-agency group of folks working on the draft rules and concepts for that. They're going to kind of transition into starting to write down some draft rules that takes all this public input that I just presented into account. We're going to continue to consult and discuss with folks here on the committee. We expect to appoint a rules advisory committee for the groundwater allocation rulemaking next spring. We anticipate we'll have multiple rules advisory committee meetings. And right now, the schedule proposes that we have rules ready for commission adoption in September, October of 2023, or next fall, about a year, well, a little less than a year from now. So that's where we're headed. With that, I'm going to pull back up our view of everybody here and just ask folks on the committee for their thoughts. I'd appreciate how that strikes folks, people's input. Again, a lot of it was aligned with things that I've heard from the committee, which is great. But I'd love to hear what you think we should do with all that.
Well, this is Bill. I don't know if I have a comment related to what I think you should do with all that. It's a lot. I mean, going through the document, there's a lot. And as you pointed out, there's some ideas and opinions that are divergent about things. But as I was going through, excuse me, that doc, I mean, it occurred to me several times, how is the department going to deal with this in rules? Topics like, equity, like, I think underserved communities being considered in this somehow, and whether that's, as scientists and, it's like you talked about setting criteria for, excessive declines and things like that. Those are numbers games that scientists, we are comfortable dealing with. And then how do issues like equity and this repeated theme of, well, we'd like to see some uses prioritized over others, and different opinions about what you could sort of read in between lines about what those are. How does that get dealt with in rulemaking?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Something that pops into my mind that might be along those lines is a thought that was put forward with respect to defining reasonably stable water levels. So one of the issues we've seen in many places is that especially domestic well owners have put in infrastructure, and they they desire, hope, expect that domestic well is going to provide them with water for, in perpetuity. And so the rules right now are I almost said unfortunately, for those folks, certainly we've run into conflict with the rules where it says substantial or undue interference is the only interference you can make a call on, and to do that you have to have a well that fully penetrates the aquifer, and that is sometimes well defined, and other times it's either well defined and it's 1,000 feet down, or it's not well defined because nobody's drilled a well that deep yet, and it doesn't take water quality into account. So water quality can also degrade with depth, right? But that from a quantity perspective, I don't know that that's necessarily directly taken into account. So lots of issues there. And one idea that was brought up was, well, we have all these different hydrogeologic settings across the state, right? And it's going to vary. So folks in the Deschutes, something we heard from this, as part of this feedback was, hey, the Deschutes formation is, 800 to 1,200 feet thick, so why hold us to a 50-foot decline when there's so much aquifer there? And I can understand that argument. And for domestic users using that, do we want to set up a set of rules whereby we expect all the domestic users to chase that water level down over time, to make that productive? And so I'm still setting up. What's the comment that I heard was, what if we set a reasonably stable level that was based on how a well is drilled, right? And so casing comes in roughly 20-foot lengths, right? And well drillers, I suspect, are typically drilling wells in 20-foot increments. And so if we have a rule set that says reasonably stable means that we're going to manage as best as possible the resource so that it doesn't decline more than, pick a number, right? I'll throw out 40 feet because it's close to 50 foot, which is the current rule. So 40 to 60 feet, right? And that is in some increment of casing lengths that, when at least going forward, or even for somebody that's deepening a well, they can say, okay, the department has committed in rule to maintaining water levels that if I hit water and I put in 3 casing lengths, that should get me through, well, plus available drawdown, that should get me through, right? And that should give me a piece of infrastructure that I can rely on for some duration of time. So that's an idea that's been put forward that I think could address some of the equity issues that folks are talking about. And that could also give us some basis on which to create a statewide, reasonably stable criteria that has reasoning behind it, acknowledging that aquifers are different, right? And some of our aquifers aren't 60 feet thick, so that's not going to necessarily work there. But that's the best response I've got to your question.
I just wanted to add too that we do have the Rural Advisory Committee process, and through that process, we can certainly, make sure that the folks that sit on that committee, represent diverse interests, right? So we can make sure we bring the voices in that we need to hear from during the rulemaking effort. So we actually incorporate that input. That is something we're very committed to making happen. So, and if you have ideas, for folks that we should be reaching out to, please feel free to share those with us.
As chair of the meeting, I'll call on myself here to make a quick comment, because that's a really good question, Phil. And it seems like a lot of times that wording is sort of automatically sprinkled in with every aspect of my life and every meeting I go to, from my neighborhood to here to get the zoo train going through Washington Park again, But it did pop up in my mind back in the comments where people had rendered ideas about what to do when there's no information. One was, and it seemed like the choices were decline or ask the applicant for more information. And when I think of a typical situation where you might have just a regular irrigator versus Google or Facebook or Apple, they're going to be able to hire. They're going to have the wherewithal to generate a lot of information by hiring, Groundwater Solutions, or they can hire consultants and collect data when a regular water user wouldn't have the ability. So that's sort of an unlevel playing field in one regard. If that option is there, well, come up with a bunch more information and maybe we'll issue your permit. So it would be interesting if I don't know how that can be dealt with in rules, but that, when I thought of equity, I thought of like big corporate deep pockets versus, the regular, agricultural water user. So that's one thing that kind of came to mind during your presentation, Justin. Anyway, thanks.
I think Richard has
Richard, yeah.
I was wondering if there are going to be some rules on the water being injected in the ASR wells so that we don't end up with another Beaverton situation where they're pumping millions of gallons of non-potable water into my aquifer.
So I guess, Richard, we aren't planning on impacting the ASR rules in this rulemaking or any that are on the books that I'm aware of. So I think that it will maintain as it is. So again, like we heard from DEQ in our last meeting, they've got a non-degradation standard. So I understand it's treated wastewater and they're meeting that non-degradation standard. And that's the case in other, California has been doing that for years, as well as other parts of the US and the world. So, so the direct answer is we aren't going to be engaged in that rulemaking with this processor soon. And yeah, and we need to pull DEQ back in to answer more questions about the quality issues. So
thank you.
Yeah.
So Justin, a couple comments. One, I think the department did a good job on the outreach, more on process than on content. I wish the department would have gone through with the outreach prior to changing the policy of September 1st. I think that caused some frustration with some of our community holders, and I'm fully aware that the commission has prioritized that and been pushing the department. So I don't know how you would have done that, but when you look at one of these in the future, it might be good to have the public comment before we even change policy going into rule. A couple things that Phil and Marshall brought up, kind of going to some of my thoughts here, is I feel that we need to build a queue. So when the determination that there's not enough information available and we decline the permit, I think that's probably the right move at this time, not saying that. But as we develop more information, either through private people that have the ability to have the economics, like Marshall said, that could determine specific areas where maybe water is available, or we tie it into House Bill 2018 that was passed in 2021, or as we did hopefully get more funding for the state, there might be areas that potentially there's water available. I'm not saying there is or not, but then you open up another opportunity. Well, those that have already put in the permit, if they would put on pause until we had a time where more information was fully developed, I think it would be good for the communities, good for the process. Not saying it's going to change the outcome of any permit, but potentially it would. So I think that's something that we should look at specifically as we go into the rules. We need to be making sure that we have that information as we develop those rules. On that same thread, I've had community constituents from across the state, just not in House District 60, reach out to me, say, Mark, I got a permit, I'm on a timeline. I need to put out a lot of investment, but now potentially I'm learning that groundwater is not going to be available in my area. My neighbors are being inclined, there's more information coming. I really don't want to miss out on that opportunity, but I really don't want to put out that money for that infrastructure with the pension not to get a return on my investment. I say, I agree. So we probably should allow some voluntarily people that have a permit with a claim of beneficial use date coming up to pause until we get more information specifically in that area in order to see if there is within the resource to develop. As we tie this into the things like I said, we should allow that to occur. We shouldn't allow or force people to develop when potentially we've made a determination that water wasn't available and water, or you know what I mean. I don't know the elaborate right there. I do like your idea, Justin, a lot on basin program rules. I think if you look back in the 80s and 90s where those were set up, they were, to me, in my anticipation, a good place for a lot of these conversations, a good place for the management of the resource, a good place to look at unique geology, unique circumstances. I mean, yeah, if anything that we could get the sideboards that you talked about, but get the specifics and basin rules, I think that's so important. I really think that's how we can work through a lot of these issues. And even when we talk about the pause or we talk about the queue that we develop, we can even control them into the basin rule area where we get more information. But high level thoughts there. I'll be quiet.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that is a good comment, and I think the things that Mark just discussed sort of are maybe a path out of the situation where instead of requesting, if there were enough applications in an area where there was not enough information to make a determination, there was a provision where water users could provide, or applicants could provide more information. That may be a situation where if there were enough people in a community, the community could somehow work with the department through some as yet to be determined program to sort of generate that information, so we don't see certain communities just sort of die the death of ignorance and hydrologic ignorance, I guess. Anyway, so Yeah, it's great comments, Mark.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
I just know real quick that, I mean, we do have these place-based planning pilots, and certainly, at least with my experience in Harney, folks are talking about kind of, you know, how might we take a consensus community plan and turn that into action through basic program rules. So that's one way to do it. So.
Oh, yeah, Phil, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, that conversation was interesting, and it makes you think about exempt uses. Like, you know, if we're creating a queue and we're going on pause and we're collecting information, you know, how are we handling, you know, exempt uses that occur? You know, you think about agricultural water right applications being put on hold while, you know, and I know that there's the relativistic argument, you know, like one has a larger impact, and you know, they've all had to sort that out in other states where, you know, 500 second homes with exempt wells have an impact as well. You know, so how does the whole exempt use thing figure in it? And I think a follow on is I know that it came up a couple of times in the response, you know, from the public, the exempt uses, but I wasn't really clear if there was a consensus on how the public felt. Like, business as usual, or is this an issue that needs to be dealt with? I couldn't quite see if there was a consensus around that.
I don't know what the consensus is, but I've heard both, as which is probably not shocking. As far as the business as usual, I guess I've heard folks say, I don't see how you can not bring them into the conversation, right? Like, they have some impact. Every well has some impact. And I in an earlier version of these slides, and certainly in past presentations, I've put up the most recent, which I think is 2015 USGS summary of water use in the state. And, you know, agriculture is 90% of the use, and municipalities are 7%, and domestic is 3%, and there's other small uses, right? And so I put that up and said, well, at least as far as where the biggest impact for our effort is, you know, domestic use isn't necessarily going to give us a huge impact. And, you know, the overappropriation rules, as it's written now, says further impacts already appropriated surface water. So a ton of these domestic wells are going to be hydraulically connected and further impacting surface water. And it's, I mean, that's just a truism. So so again, for this current rulemaking, because the exempt uses are in statute, we can't undo statute with rulemaking. So that it's, you know, it's not an immediate issue that we need to work out, but it's certainly something that's on people's mind that you know, might be a future, or I think we can expect it to continue to be a future conversation. So yeah, it's hanging out there. And Phil, I guess just to finish what your comment was, I have heard people say, hey, we need to stop this. And I make the same comment I just made, which is, you know, it does have an impact, yes. And on the relativity scale, just from where we're putting our effort, I think we're putting it in the right place for the grand picture of, let's not have these big, you know, over appropriation issues like we're seeing in parts of, you know, most recently spotlighted the Harney Basin. So we're not gonna create those kind of issues, I don't think, with domestic use development, at least not on the same scale. Like we might have locals, and I shouldn't say that. We do have local issues, right? Like the community of Alpine south of Corvallis has this issue, and I'm sure many other small communities do as well. So yeah, something to think about, but pushing off to the future.
Good discussion. There's layers and layers and layers to everything we do in this business. Any other thoughts or comments, or are we? I'm happy to continue this, but
before we move on, if I'd love to invite the folks representing the drilling industry on the committee to give me any thoughts that they have. But specifically, I put out this idea that I heard about what if, you know, an option or possibility of defining a reasonably stable water level based on, you know, the functional way in which wells are drilled. Does that strike our drillers as reasonable, as crazy, as something in between, a better idea? I would love to hear what folks think of that. And if not today, that's fine. You're welcome to get a hold of me individually too, if you're more comfortable doing that. So. All right.
Okay. Are we ready to move on to agenda item F? If so, we'll go ahead and do that. That's committee member updates. I personally have nothing new to offer for the committee's consideration. So are there any other committee members who have items or issues or things that they'd like to bring up or mention today? Yeah, Susan, go ahead.
I just want to say that I did attend the Central Point meeting and it was fascinating. So really well presented, some very, very technical issues that you put together in a way that I think everybody could understand. And I know that was a lot of work, and I just want to applaud you. As well as you mentioned, there were a lot of people who had other issues other than what the meeting was about. And I wondered if there's talk of having more regional meetings to address those issues.
That's a good question. There are no planned additional meetings, but it's a good point, right? And I think there was a lot of pent up demand since we hadn't been out and about in the community with the COVID issues and travel restrictions for quite some time. But yeah, obviously there's demand, right? That was obvious at every single meeting we went to. So yeah, thank you for that input. And
I mean, I would add too that when we start the RAC meeting process, those are public meetings as well, and there'll be an opportunity for folks to comment during those meetings, along with I'm sure we'll go through the public hearing process too. So there'll be additional opportunities for public input.
It was just nice to see the groundwater community engaged in a way I've never seen it. It's really hard to get people engaged. So it was, you know, as far as getting data regarding or getting feedback, it looks like it was successful, and it couldn't have been. It got contentious in Central Point and a little bit. And anyways, I'm very glad that I attended, and I applaud all your efforts that it took to get that together.
well, thank you.
Department came in, I think, 2 weeks ago or something, the Harney Basin. Did their, what I would say, their first real big public outreach meeting since the groundwater study's been published. It's been published in April, as Justice give us updates on that. Probably 50 people in attendance, good attendance, few irrigators, just a handful. Some of the irrigators that have been directly involved with the opportunities we've had with the study team, with USGS. USGS, tough job. to try to distill down, 5 years of work and 300 pages into 15 minutes without people's eyes rolling back in their head and glossing over. They did a good job. There was a lot of numbers put out there, but they did good. Ivan came up, Justin and Director Woodcock were not able to make the trip because of sniffling noises or something, and wanted to be make sure the public wasn't concerned. But Ivan did a good job at a high level discussing, potentially what comes next. Couple takeaways is the reality of the situation to a lot of people that haven't been involved is not clearly there. It's been 7 years since May 26, 2015, when the department came in and said, hey, we have a problem. Now we understand the scope of that problem, but I encouraging the department still to do more reach out. They're going to have a couple more public meetings, potentially before the first rack happens in April. It seems like there is a clear desire from the department to try to seek, if the community will support it in a fashionable time, some volunteer agreement scenarios that could run in parallel with regulation or parallel with critical groundwater designation. That's the mission I've been on, will continue to be on. I believe that's how the collaborative in their groundwater portion plan is effective at implementing a lot of the tools they've come up with is through the volunteer agreement. So it's going to be a lot of conversations moving forward, but it was a good conversation from the department. Two other things real quick. One, because it is my last meeting. One, it's been a pleasure to be on this. I'll just leave you with some thoughts. As I've seen people come and go from this group, there's two different ways that this can go. They can be passive. They can, listen and give Justin a few comments and be a sounding board. Or you can, try to impress your will, or when you coalesce around a certain conversation. Just if we look back at House Bill 2018, that probably doesn't get passed if it wasn't for this group. That probably doesn't, and I think that's just a huge data gap. But that took, honestly, some pushing. That took some from motions from this committee. That took, hey, Justin, can we do this? Well, we should be able to, but it took a real effort. We were able to, direct the department on getting some deliverables to this committee that went to the commission, that ended up in a policy option package that did not end up in a governor's requested budget, but then we took it forward as a legislative concept. Let us share with you. If you have a thing that you all agree on, you think it's important, push. It's not pushing. I think it's just actually using what this committee could do. Lastly, I'll offer up, use me as a resource. I won my last election. I'll continue in the water conversations with water policy in Oregon. We have a pretty aggressive agenda coming in 2023 that I can start sharing with you. But if you guys got an idea and you want to try to develop it into a legislative concept, get a hold of me. I spend still 70% of my time, even in that arena, talking about water. So thanks for the time.
Just a couple thoughts. One, first of all, I talked to last week Joanna Thamke, who's the interim director of the Oregon Water Science Center for USGS, who was on field trip a couple weeks ago out there in Harney and said she had met you. And she's very bright, hugely experienced in a large part of the West. She told me that was perhaps the best field trip she had ever been on. She was really impressed with things that have gone on in the Harney and the people involved. And I, since I'm the chair and Ken isn't here, I just thank you for your time and mentorship on this committee, Mark. And I think we all look forward to working with you in the future, and both as committee members and personally as well. So you'll be hugely missed, and I would actually, I'm really close to entertaining a motion to not allow Mark to leave, because you've been really influential in sort of shifting this from sort of a rubber stamp, sounding board to being able to take some of the ideas from the constituencies and the backgrounds that we all represent and try to actually create something new. So
I'll
thank
second that motion.
Thanks, Marshall. Thanks, guys and gals.
Any other committee? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, not a committee member, but I also want to jump in and specifically thank Chad Courtney. He's also at his last meeting. I'd appreciated having his input as well coming through, especially a couple of years ago when we were talking about the backflow protection stuff. I thought that that he and the other folks representing the drillers on this committee did a really good job of giving feedback that had like real impact on the actual wording of the rules. So I want to say thanks to both Chad and Mark for their service. Susan's coming to the end of her first 3 years and has agreed to stay on. So appreciate Susan sticking with us for another 3 years. And I guess I'll tease, well, I mean, it's already out on the internet, but we've had applicants to the committee that we're proposing the commission adopt that will maintain the geographic representation as well as the interest representation. So another person in the well drilling industry from the Umatilla Basin or even the town of Umatilla, Brandon Brown, and another person involved in irrigated ag, as well as agricultural real estate, which I think will be interesting from the southeast part of the state. He's got irrigated ag in Crane. I'm not sure exactly where he lives. Might be over a little further east, but Ken Bentz. So we've got those folks recommended to the commission as well as Susan for a reappointment, and if all gets approved, that'll be our group going forward next year.
Any other comments from committee members or okay, then we'll open it up to the general public. If anybody across the whole spectrum has anything to say or would like to ask or bring up, now's the time.
And so 2 things. First of all,
guys.
Yeah, go ahead, Chad.
This is Chad. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you for the meetings we've had. It's been an enjoyable experience. And I think if Brandon Brown got on this, I think he would be a good attribute as far as a member of the drilling community. So I'm glad to hear that part. But anyway, just want to say a quick thank you, and we'll see you guys all down the road somewhere. So thank you.
Thank you, Chad.
Yeah, Chad, you're free to join us even if you're not a committee member.
Okay. Will do. Thank you.
And
can I just jump in real quick? And I wanted to mention that prior to taking our rules to the commission next year for adoption, we will be bringing them to GWAC during public comment period or comment. I forgot to mention that earlier, so just wanted to get that out.
And as far as public comment, Eric Schneider is, I think, the only person we've got here that's not on the committee. So Eric, just want to make sure that we give you the opportunity to jump in if you'd like.
I have no comments.
Right, well. Okay, well, yeah, we appreciate your being here regardless. Anything else for the good of the order? If not, I would probably adjourn the meeting. So I don't know, do we have to have a motion to adjourn?
I
doubt it. I'm gonna Google Robert's Rules of Order here and see. Anyway, no, I'll just go ahead and adjourn. It's Mark, it's been a pleasure. Chad, it's been a pleasure, and it's good to see everybody on this. What is here is a very, very windy day at my house.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thanks again, everybody, for your input, and we'll see you in early-ish 2023. There'll be emails in the interim to get everybody organized. And again, I'm sorry, I should have probably made a quick agenda item for this now that we're all closed out. I'm planning to keep this format of us meeting the Tuesdays before commission meetings. So the dates for our meetings next year, I'll just base those on the commission, and that'll again allow us to have the most up-to-date information presented to you and an opportunity to provide input ahead of the commission meeting. So I'll just give you a heads up that that's the plan, but we can talk about that during our first meeting again next year and make sure everybody on the 2023 committee agrees that's where we want to go. So thanks again, and until next time.
Quick question, is there any discussion about meeting in person again, or?
Yes, yeah, and I'm sorry.
You guys were with that.
Yep, ideally. So I was also trying to follow the commission meeting on that, and ideally we would have done that today. And honestly, I just have been too buried to get the hybrid meeting together. So I do believe that we will start having an in-person option available. We'll keep the hybrid, so folks from the east side of the state, don't have to make a 10-hour drive for a 2-hour meeting, but we'll have the option available for folks. So that's the plan, and you'll see that happen in the commission, and Nirvana and Christy and team will have it run flawlessly. I have every faith. So.
Everyone just put out the good mojo for that. We're going to have our first one tomorrow, and it is going to be a little bit of entertainment, I'm anticipating. So stay tuned.
Okay, then. Well, I guess we're adjourned, and thanks again.
Thanks, Marshall. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.